Well, around this time once again. It's good to see you. Tonight we're going to have a look at one of Queensland's founding cities and at a project that's injected new life into an old community. It's a project that has a great bearing on the economy of the entire state. In fact, you could say it has a bearing on the lives of every single one of us. It's this, the new Stanwell power station. We'll check out a chimney that's more than 65 stories high. Take you to the heart of a $1.6 billion investment that can be operated by just a small team of workers. See the human face of the state's biggest construction job and discover its significance for these lovable Australians. Rockhampton, central Queensland, close on 40 years ago. It was still developing a city spirit, celebrating 100 years of growth. There was a centenary parade, and it seemed everyone turned out to see the pageant. Rockhampton was looking to a prosperous future, with a modern bridge spanning the Fitzroy. It was taking pride in past traditions with a royal visit, no less, as the newly crowned head of the Commonwealth made the time to tour suburban streets in this country city half a world away from London.
And somewhere in the crowd that day was a very young and very bewildered me, wondering why that lady in the car looked so miserable. It was a different time then. No TV, no computers, no traffic jams. Life was a lot easier. You held a parade and everybody came. But now things seem to be more complicated. Perhaps we all expect more. But there is one thing Rocky's retained from the past, that's its civic pride. And this month it's directed just outside the city limits.
March 1st, 1993, Stanwell Power Station came online to supply power to the state grid. Power for some of the things our society now demands. The time and money invested in the state's biggest construction job is starting to pay off. Our need for electricity is a product of just a few decades' change to our lifestyles. And those changes, for better or for worse, just couldn't have happened without electricity. Queensland was actually the first colony in the British Empire to provide public power. That was in 1888. when Barton and White provided a 30-kilowatt supply from a shed in Elizabeth Street, Brisbane, to the post office next door. Providing electricity was a precarious financial undertaking in the early years. In fact, the company's financial backer urged them to stick to selling electric bells. These days, all Queensland's electricity comes to the end users through the state power grid and is generated by the Queensland Electricity Commission. It wasn't always that way. Individual towns, and in Brisbane's case, several localities, had their own power authorities. At one stage, there were dozens of different electricity suppliers throughout the state. In the late 1890s, even tiny, isolated Thargomindah had a hydro plant of sorts up and running, using an artesian bore to drive a dynamo capable of powering 75 lamps. In the city, the Brisbane Tramway Company generated its own electricity to run trams from 1897. For more than 20 years, it sold power to other users along the tram routes, much to the annoyance of the major supplier, the City Electric Light Company. After 1924, the newly formed Brisbane City Council took over responsibility for the Tramway Trust and its powerhouses. New Farm and Bulimba power stations were built as the City Council and the CEL fought for the power business of Brisbane. They were the super powerhouses of their day and took their place on the city skyline alongside our most famous landmarks. Gradually, and only after bitter rivalry, the electricity supply industry became more streamlined. Queenslanders embraced electricity and all its home comforts. But there was still a sense of wonder at it. A few decades ago, the lighting of public buildings was a source of pride in our cities and a tourist attraction. In the country, electricity and what it could do rivaled sideshow attractions and the best rural displays. The way we were, but these days our needs are greater. The planners at the Queensland Electricity Commission began work on the Stanwell project more than 10 years ago. They forecast that we'd need the extra power to cope with new industries, growing populations, and the ever-increasing list of uses for power in our community. The QEC's acting commissioner, Keith Hillis, says that foresight has paid off.
Well, Stanwell ensures that we have an ongoing supply of electricity in Queensland through into the latter part of this decade. But because of the way it's been built, the special attention that was given to its design features, the way it was constructed, the modern construction techniques and project management arrangements, the best of technology has gone into the power station, new working arrangements are being implemented to run the power station. So all in all, it brings to Queenslanders an assuredness that they will have an ongoing, reliable and competitive supply of electricity.
Providing enough power for the state isn't quite as simple as it sounds. Electricity in large quantities can't be stored. It has to be generated at exactly the moment it's needed. When you turn on the television, at the same moment as your neighbour turns on her heater, and the factory down the road starts up for the day shift, you all want electricity instantly available. That means we must have enough generating capacity to cope with the maximum power demands, even on the coldest day in winter or the hottest day in summer. Then we need to allow for routine maintenance at power stations, so we don't have blackouts in parts of the state just to keep the system going. Stanwell is designed to play a big part in keeping a reliable electricity supply up to the users. It'll be what we call a base load station, providing about 1/4 of the power Queenslanders need day in and day out.
A big job. And let me tell you, this power station is an awe-inspiring place. Just look at the size of things. These cooling towers are as tall as a 35-storey building. It takes you nearly 5 minutes just to walk around the base. Almost hollow inside, they use a natural draft system to cool down the hot water from the turbine condensers.
They're amazing structures. Stanwell has 2 of them. Watching them grow has been a fascination for the locals. The shell is poured as a series of reinforced concrete rings. The formwork for the concrete pour at the very top is jacked up hydraulically after each ring is poured, so the collar of timber and steel creeps up as the structure grows. And it's been impressively fast. Contractors work virtually round the clock at times to pour a ring a day and finish the towers in record time. These towers are in a cyclone area, so despite the relatively thin concrete shell, they've been designed to stand up to nature's worst battering. They're the first cyclone-strength cooling towers in the country. A head for heights is a must when you're on these jobs. And the steam you see coming from the top of the towers is just that, water vapour, an impressive sight and non-polluting.
Now this is what I call humid. It's got to be one of the biggest saunas that's ever been built. I'm actually right inside the cooling tower. The steam going through here is left over after condensing and cooling the water from the turbine. It vents through here at a rate equivalent to about 200 litres of water every second. And keeps steaming up my glasses.
The warm water that's been used for cooling in the turbine condensers is pumped through pipes about 12 metres above a cold water pond at the base of the cooling tower. As the warm water cascades down, the rising air created by the shape of the tower cools it. Then the water is recirculated to cool the turbines again. The single chimney stack is 210 metres high. That is taller than any building in the city of Brisbane. There's 600 tonnes of steel in the structure, and it's lined with 1 million specially made heat-resistant bricks. Translated into everyday terms, that's enough steel to build 40 coal wagons and enough bricks to build about 150 average 3-bedroom houses. All that in a single and very imposing structure. The chimney's a sort of 4-in-1 construction. It's made of 4 flues to disperse the exhaust from the 4 generating sets. One of those sets is online at Stanwell now. The others will follow when they're completed and when they're needed. The stack's built so high to allow gases to disperse into the atmosphere rather than end up on the ground. The height has been precisely designed to make sure Stanwell meets and exceeds the requirements of Queensland's Clean Air Act. But, in fact, more than 99.9% of the solid pollutants are cleaned from the exhaust gases before they even reach the chimney. As we all recognise, burning coal inevitably produces greenhouse gases. But Dave Clark, who's construction manager here at Stanwell, says at this power station every effort's been made to keep those gases to a minimum.
Dave, the thing that really impressed me is that you really can see no evidence of any emissions coming out of your chimney. Do you still have greenhouse gases being released?
Yes, we do, Frank, but obviously we've minimised them.
How have you been able to cut them back?
By using the latest technology from around the world, and obviously this means that we can have a power station that operates as much as possible.
And having the station up and running and producing power all the time, is that any help?
It certainly does, Frank, because what it means is that we're not wasting fuel by just heating units up before they come online.
They're up and running all the time.
That's the aim, to have them running to the maximum amount of time.
If you want things on a grand scale, you can't beat a power station. How about this for a coal scuttle? It's actually called a slot bunker, and it stockpiles enough coal to drive the power station for several days. So how about right now, we have a simplified look at the way power is generated here at Stanwell. We start off with coal from Curragh mine near Blackwater, chosen for its clean burning properties. Stanwell has a $1 billion contract with the Curragh coalfield. When it's fully operational in 3 years' time, the power station will burn up to 4 million tonnes of coal a year. That's a lot of coal. In fact, it's enough to fully load a coal train stretching from Rockhampton to the New South Wales border. The coal's delivered by rail, then bunkered or stockpiled at the power station. From the stockpile, the coal is carried by conveyor to pulverisers, crushed until it's as fine as talcum powder and burned in the boilers. The boilers heat water originally pumped from the Fitzroy River and then filtered. The water's circulated through the boiler walls in a massive network of pipes surrounding the furnaces, which are virtually controlled fireballs.
The pipes absorb heat until the water in them becomes steam, superheated to an amazing 541 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to make steel glow a dull red in colour. The steam is piped through to drive a series of turbine blades, which generate electricity. A switchyard at Stanwell transforms the power to a suitable voltage to be distributed via the state power grid to wherever it's needed in Queensland. It's not just for the local area. The spent steam that's driven the turbines then goes to the condensers, where it's cooled, enters a liquid state again, and is recycled to be heated to steam once more. Well, that takes care of the water. What about the waste, the exhaust from the heating process? The hot gases from the burning coal pass through the electrostatic precipitators. There, a combination of filters and electric charges keeps the particles of ash and so on from going through to the chimney.
You can see the precipitators behind me. They have those inverted cone-shaped hoppers at the base. They're an essential part of the environmental controls at a modern power station.
The ash goes into the hoppers beneath the precipitators, where it's collected and contained on site. It can be reused to make cement for road building. So, coal to steam to drive the turbines to generate electricity. The ash is collected, remaining exhaust gases are dispersed via the chimney, and the steam is cooled and recycled to be reused.
As I said, a simple enough process, but on an enormous scale. This is the Turbine Hall where the generators are housed. And this is so vast, you could actually fit 2 football fields inside here.
The first generating set at Stanwell, which is a turbine and generator coupled together, turns out 350 megawatts of power. Eventually, there'll be 4 of these generating sets. But even now, at 1/4 capacity, Stanwell is turning on enough power to meet the needs of 5 cities the size of Rockhampton. The city of Rockhampton has watched a landmark grow on its doorstep. The project was first proposed in the early 1980s. Apart from the work it's provided in times of recession, it's been hard to miss. Rising from a 1,500-hectare site flanked by hills and bushland 20 minutes from town. First, in 1989, came a giant steel skeleton. Thousands of tons of steel formed the bare bones of the massive development. Then came the apparent confusion of extensive earthworks and all the piping and paraphernalia that had to go in under the ground. Gradually, the main structures grew. The stack, the cooling towers, the turbine hall, and the place started to look the part. The city watched as massive structures and heavy equipment were ferried to the site. Finally, the heart of the power station was installed, the generators, and the sophisticated electronics that'll bring the power to the people. Just coordinating the different stages of construction has been a mind-boggling task that occupied a team of QEC engineers for many years, and it's led to the development of specific computer software to manage the task. Once the technology was in place, there were months of tests to make sure that when the power station came online, it could be relied on to carry its load for Queensland. Probably the most spectacular activity is what they call blow-through. Put simply, the power station is turned on and high-pressure steam blasts through the thousands of pipes and valves to clear them of any impurities. There's a tongue of steam 100 meters long with a roar like a jumbo jet taking off. During peak construction, there were 70 major contractors on site at Stanwell, and up to 900 people a day checked in through the security gate. So far, there have been 3,800 jobs created in the building of Stanwell. The power project's people are a story on their own. From the very beginning, Stanwell wanted to break the employment pattern of big projects. Instead of bringing its workforce along for the ride, Stanwell was to be a homegrown power station, using local labour and skills wherever possible. This aim has been achieved, with as many as 70% of the jobs on site going to central Queensland people. That's kept the work and the wages in the neighbourhood. Traditionally, jobs like Stanwell take a human toll. Lives lost, permanent injuries. That wasn't good enough for those building this power station. Construction manager Dave Clark made it his personal goal that Stanwell would be built without any serious accidents. Safety training, with the backing of contractors, became a vital part of the work environment. And so far, so good. When work got underway, contractors found that there was no formal training for many of the skills they needed. So, a training scheme, at the time unique to the Stanwell job, was begun. It was called the Stanwell Skills Development Program and has become a model for training in the construction industry Australia-wide. For some, Stanwell was a way out of the dole queues in a traditionally depressed area of the economy. Alan Hamilton was unemployed and unskilled, with a young family to support, when training through SSDP first became available.
What the regulation requires, Regulation 97 requires of us, is the tool...
He started with a course on landscaping. Since then, he's done several construction courses, won Stanwell's training award, and is now a safety officer.
I've done a dogman's course, crane driver, got my ticket for that. I'm also doing the rigger and scaffolders course at the moment.
And you've filled all those positions here at Stanwell.
That's correct, yes.
Well, what are you looking forward to when this project is concluded?
At the conclusion of it, I'd like to see if I can go on to other construction projects around Queensland or around Australia, or maybe over to general operations here in the power station.
So really, Stanwell's opened up a whole new life for you?
Most definitely, yes.
Stanwell has shouldered its responsibility as a major employer, but it's also made the effort to become a part of the Central Queensland community. Each year, there's been an open day on site, with thousands accepting the invitation to check out their big new neighbour.
Any questions? Right, yes.
How big is the cooling tower?
The cooling tower is the big structure you see over there. It's about 130 metres high, and it's about 100 metres across at the base. It's used...
The project has been accessible to students and others.
We've got to take the plant out of the pot, and to do that, we've got to do it very gently, because remember, this is a baby.
Their involvement's been welcomed in schemes like tree planting, and they've taken their own early look at Stanwell and its impact on the environment. The students of Emmaus College were more involved than most. They helped make a professional video assessing the project's focus on the environment.
There's a better way to control weeds and insects, using something natural. Fish. These are baby silver and golden perch. More than 11,000 fingerlings will be released into the Stanwell Dam. Their progress will be studied by scientists. That's a lot of fish, and mosquito larvae is their favourite tucker. They eat weeds too. Goodbye mozzies and goodbye weeds.
When Stanwell's finished, regular tours will maintain that link with neighbours and tourists. You can't build a huge development like this without some impact on the natural environment. Before work started, a study showed no rare plants or animals on the site, but looking after the natural surroundings isn't being left to chance at Stanwell. Firstly, as we've seen, there are the built-in pollution controls to minimise the harmful effects from burning coal in the first place. Water quality is important. Water, pumped into Stanwell to turn into steam to drive the turbines, comes from the Fitzroy River along a 28-kilometre pipeline to the storage dam on site. This water is treated for use at the power station and recycled several times. Any water that's discharged into creeks is first treated to make sure it doesn't pose a threat by pollution or temperature to the flora and fauna of the area. Water features on site attract wildlife, water birds, wallabies. To add to the attraction, as the storage dam filled, a nesting island was created. Then there's the physical environment of the power station itself. It's been designed with a natural bush buffer zone. This zone's been protected and extended with the planting of thousands of trees. Combined effort by the QEC, the Queensland Forest Service and the local community. The buffer zone looks good, but it's important for the wildlife of the area too. For instance, the environmental park next to the buildings. It's a picnic area and a place for school and other tour groups to sit while they learn about the power station. Even there, careful attention's been paid to tree planting to make sure that the types of trees and their placement will allow wildlife to cross the park from habitat to habitat. It's become a wildlife corridor. When the construction workers came to the Stanwell site, there were no koalas in the area. They'd been driven away years before as grazing spread. But a detailed study has determined that the right types of trees exist there to support a koala colony. So, in a carefully monitored program, koalas look like being reintroduced to the area as part of ongoing koala habitat research.
So, a major industrial project and the possible rebirth of a koala colony, a unique partnership with an eye to the future. But what of the future after Stanwell?
When Stanwell is fully online in 1996, it'll be a cornerstone of the state's power supply. It'll produce 1,400 megawatts, a quarter of the power needs for the whole of Queensland. And it'll be cost-effective, continuing to provide electricity to Queenslanders for the lowest unit cost in Australia. With stage 1 completed, the site is still bustling. When construction is finished and Stanwell is fully operational, it'll be almost silent. A full-time staff of about 200 will be enough to run the $1.6 billion installation. How long Stanwell will meet Queensland's power needs is unknown. It depends on how wisely and efficiently we as a community use electricity. The state's planners are already looking beyond Stanwell, anticipating what future power needs will be and how to meet them. If usage patterns stay the same, we'll need a new power source by the year 1998. Alternative energy sources, gas, solar, wind, wave, are being trialled and improved. But we're still a long way from the time when the amount and the cost of power from these sources will match up with what we as consumers are prepared to pay. So, conservation is important, and it's up to all of us to restrict our own use of electricity to save money and resources. What are our options? Will Stanwell be the last big power station of its kind for Queensland? Minerals and Energy Minister Tony McGrady is one of those who will have to choose which option is right for Queensland.
Planners are already working on the options for Queensland to cope with power demand. Now, whether that means a new power station or extensions to existing ones, something will have to be done soon. But we'll need to make those decisions the next couple of years because of the enormous amount of planning that's required. Stanwell represents a great achievement for Queensland workers and for the QEC. It's on time, it's on budget, and it has an outstanding safety record. You know, it's the biggest construction job in the state, and really, it's been a model project.
For the moment, and for Queensland, Stanwell's official opening is a milestone of state development, with jobs for thousands of Queenslanders and power for us all.